want to wipe the keyboard down, scrub your computer. Sorry about the confusion.
It's not your confusion, it's everybody's
Little
little one. Okay, thank you.
I should turn off my video. Stop video. Right?
So if you're chatting before the meeting with Sally, you might want to check it because you might want volume for everybody, or you're going to rely on Angie's volume. Mic down. Maybe just turn the volume for everybody.
Is this on here? Will this definitely make a difference?
I don't think it will because I've turned the volume down on this. So you're going to have to rely on Angie's sound.
If I turn our sound on.
It might help. I just hope the mic doesn't pick it up. I turned the mic off or the mic volume right down. Let's just see if you're chatting with one, Sally, yourself. We'll discover the issues.
Just turn my sound off. Picking or talk up. I got my speaker off, but I gotta turn off my mic somehow.
Not hearing any sound. Angela, how's the internet out your way? Do you get good internet reception in your area?
Hi, Phil. Sorry, yes, I'm actually at the office today, but my internet at home has actually been better since COVID started. I think they've kind of bumped us up with ExploreNet. That's the only option we have for internet. So I cannot complain. It's been much better since COVID hit. They seem to have improved the service for the area.
Thanks, that helps because I now know if the sound is working, but we had the same experience here in our area. Our community got together and paid Bell to put in 5, and the neighbors all said, since all you people got off the internet, our ExploreNet is much better because it was less overloaded. So
Yeah, I think that's what's happening, eh?
yeah.
Yeah, Angela, I have ExploreNet too. It's my only option. And I guess a little over a year ago, I upgraded to their LTE 10 megabit per second max service. And I can actually stream now. I can stream anything.
Perfect.
Yeah.
That's perfect. Actually, they wanted us to jump onto a different satellite system this summer.
Oh,
And they're trying to get a bunch of their customers to go to the new satellite. And we opted to stay because our theory was if they were getting enough people to switch to the new satellite, then that should lighten the load on the original satellite. And so we're just going to hang tight right where we are, and it is getting better. So I don't know, we're able to stream and watch movies and watch live hockey games, and it's working. So
so you're on satellite because I'm on line of sight to a tower in Kinburn somewhere.
yeah, we don't have that capability.
Yeah, okay, interesting.
Hi, Janet.
Hi, Kirby.
How are you?
You missed our training session.
Yeah, I know. I had a council meeting yesterday.
Oh, okay. Well, I hear you're getting trained later, so that's okay. I know you've been on the committee before, so.
They sent me. She sent me the presentation that you had yesterday.
Right.
So she sent me that. So
Okay.
I reviewed that this morning. So
Very good. Hello, Jeff.
Hi, how are you?
I'm very well. I'm missing our road trips to Toronto where we get to eat Indian food.
Well, we do important business too.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Well, I also miss your political analyses.
Has there been any word on the resumption of those meetings, even virtually?
Well, I know they're running by executive committee.
Yeah.
And actually I was having a chat with Sally because I would think with Zoom, you know, even with just the voting delegates, that they should be able to run a meeting virtually.
Especially the annual meeting. It's
well, yeah. And if they don't want to wait, regulations do come out this fall. I really think they should be, anyway, she and I were talking about it, and I may need to send them an email to sort of say something.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. It's John.
Hi, John.
hi, John.
Hello. Oh,
Your bookshelf looks the same, Janet.
oh, mine?
Yeah.
Well, it needs to be cleaned up is what it needs to be.
Is there anything exciting in the core of Ottawa today, John?
Great weather,
Well,
really, and marching with all the little kids and their parents off to school today, and quite a procedure. I mean, they had a lineup of 2 blocks long with parents and kids to get them into Broadview Public School, and it was not something I could see them wanting to do on a daily basis. So still a few kinks to work out.
Yeah, we had the same thing in CARP when I was the Huntley Centennial. All the parents and their little kids, and I mean, it's nice to see. I mean, CARP has such a huge walking bunch of kids. Like, apparently it's one of the highest in the city of having kids that actually walk to the school. And it's always so nice to watch them biking and walking on their own, right? Because it's a pretty safe community. But today the parents were with the most of them that I saw. So I guess, they're checking out how things are going to be handled.
The other thing that's happened, which I'm very supportive of, is that they've reduced the speed limit to 30 kilometers an hour.
Oh, 30.
And, and they've put in more of the traffic cameras.
Mhm.
And it seems to be having a real positive effect. But it even takes me a little adjustment to, I'm okay with 40, but I have to kind of relearn what 30 is.
The problem we have in CARP, people line up for 2 blocks where they only have to walk for 2 blocks. But they line up in a car and they wait till they get their little Johnny instead of just walking, because everyone in CARP can walk to the school these days. We don't have snow. Everywhere, wherever you live in CARP, you can walk to the school in 12 minutes. We measure it, but unfortunately some parents don't wanna, they rather line up for half an hour, but they don't want their kids to walk for 10 minutes. So, but that's the problem we have right now. Every school in our ward has a police officer in it, whether, now the police doing it for free, eventually it's going to pay duty to the school board. So it's not a good situation we're in. Stonecrest is worse today. I tweeted out for residents to avoid it. That's how bad the traffic was on.
All right. I don't know where Sally is.
Hi.
Sally is hiding.
Okay. Yeah, but she's not on. Like, she's not.
Yeah, I'm on now. Hello.
Sally?
No, I'm here.
Okay, good.
Sorry, I was just waiting to hear. I've been working offline, so I was just listening.
Okay.
So I'm ready when you are.
All right, so I'm just trying to see if there's anybody who we are missing that we were expecting. I'm just looking quickly on my screen here. But anyway, I think we might as well get going. It's 1:03. So Sally, if you could start with the roll call.
Sure. Paul Kehoe. Teresa Fritz. Jeff
Teresa's
Atkinson.
I'm
Pardon
here.
me?
Sorry, present, Teresa?
Excellent. Jeff Atkinson.
Present.
John Inglis. John Inglis. Roxanne Darling. Kirby Thompson.
Yes.
William King.
Present.
Elwin Burke. Faye Campbell.
Present.
Krista Lowry.
Present.
Bev Holmes.
Present.
Gary McAvoy. Phil Sweetnam. Phil?
I'm here.
John, mute.
Present.
John Carrillo.
Present.
Eli Alshantiri.
Present.
Janet Mason and Glenn Gower.
Here.
Eli, you
have
put on a suit.
All right.
Only in the picture.
Only in the picture. Okay. Eli also is sporting a very interesting new nice goatee there. So very good. All right. So we have nice to see you all. And I know I've seen some of you in person with masks the last couple of meetings. So we'll start now with the adoption of the agenda. So I have a resolution resolved that the agenda for 16 September 2020 board meeting be adopted as presented. So I need someone to move. I see Phil waving his hand. I see a second with Jeff Atkinson. All in favor? All right, I think the motion is carried. Any declarations of interest? Did you receive any, Sally?
I did not.
Okay, excellent. All right, so we have a couple of administrative things to get through, which is approval of board minutes. So we have in the package the board minutes from our last meeting, which was the 17th of June. So resolved that the minutes of the Mississippi Valley Board of Directors meeting held on 17th of June 2020 be received and approved as printed. And I need someone to move. John Carreau moves. I see Faye Campbell second. All in favor? Okay, it looks like the motion is carried. I guess I should be asking if there's any comments on them. So then we have our in-camera board meeting from August, the minutes from that included in the package. So resolved that the minutes of the Mississippi Valley Board of Directors meeting held on 28 August 2020 be received and approved as printed. I need someone to move. I see Teresa moves. I see, I think that's Kirby. No, that's Bev. Sorry, Bev seconding. Sorry, it's kind of dark in your room there, Bev.
Yeah, it's the sun coming through.
All right, so Bev Flowers seconds, or not Flowers. I'm sorry, Bev. I do have Bev Flowers.
Holmes.
Holmes, thank you. God, I just went blank. Seconds, all in favor? I see carries, motion carried. Thank you very much. All right, we have business arising, the WECI letter to the province and municipalities, which was from our last board meeting in June. So Sally, please address.
Right, so as I believe all of you are aware, we did send out the letters as directed, and we received an acknowledgement from our local MPP, Goldie Gamari, and we also, Janet received a letter response from Steve Clark from Municipal Affairs. I was just checking my files again to find, I could have sworn we had also received a letter back from Yakabuski, but I'm thinking maybe Janet, it went to you. So I need to nail that down. What I can tell you though is that Ron Higgins, Mayor of North Frontenac, has been following up with Minister Yakabuski's office and is looking to get a meeting with them. He was going to try to potentially get the other wardens from Frontenac and from Lanark counties and possibly Lennox-Addington to also attend with him, and possibly other representation from the board or other municipal representatives. So he and I had been communicating fairly regularly. I tried to connect with him again in advance of this meeting to see if he had got a date, because he had been hoping to get a meeting date this week. But that obviously I don't think has happened at this point. So I will continue to follow up with him. As I think everybody's aware, we do feel that given the, I'll call it political status of CAs at this stage, that it's better that this kind of messaging come directly from our member municipalities, who are obviously the funders and the ones at the end of the day who are most critically affected by this, both as the funders and as the residents who are affected by the infrastructure. So so we've been very happy that he's taken on that role to champion it, and I'll keep you posted on further details.
Sally, could you clarify how many of the municipalities have sent in letters of support?
All except for Lanark Highlands. And Bill, you and I talked about that, and I am going to be at Lanark Highlands again. It's either later this month or next month. And at that time, I'm hoping to be able to talk to council about it, and perhaps they can revisit it at that time.
Right, so thank you to all of you. Thank you to all of you who have lent your support and to ensure that your council passed the resolution to support the letter. So John Carreau.
Thank you, Chair. Glenn and Eli, what is the status of that request with the City of Ottawa, please?
I can answer that, Chair, if you'd like.
Okay, but go ahead, Glenn. Okay, go ahead.
Our council passed a motion in late August or mid-August instructing the mayor to write a letter in support of what our Conservation Authority was looking for, and that letter has been written and sent to the province.
And I did copy Sally on a letter from the mayor, and I see Sally shaking her head.
Good to hear.
All right, any more questions and comments? All right, we'll move on to item number 3, the budget control report by Angela.
Sorry about that. Takes a little second to get there. Everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes,
Perfect. All right. So the budget control takes us up till, oh, hang on, we're froze. There we go. Up till August 31st in the report, right? Getting click happy. All right, so our revenues and our expenditures are on target. Our revenues, of course, are slightly lower than we were hoping for, but that is COVID driven. But our revenues for planning and regs are still they remain strong at the end of August. Now we know that historical trends will suggest that is anticipated to decline slightly in the next quarter. Our revenues for visitor services for parking revenues at our conservation areas has been very strong. They've been very popular areas, and that has helped offset our loss of revenues at those areas so far this year. So we're trudging along quite well. To say we're at the end of August, we're about 60% into our revenues and expenditures for the year. So we are on target. We have received temporary emergency wage subsidy funding in the amount of $25,000, and that's to help out offset payroll costs due to COVID. And so we were awarded that. And we've also applied for the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy, and that provides a 75% wage subsidy for eligible employers. Other CAs have been successful. The amount is unclear, it depends on the number of weeks and the percentages that they allocate for those weeks. So that funding will have more updates for the board later on a subsequent report to you in the future. And so that funding has not been included in our projections so far. We were successful for Canada's Summer Jobs funding. So we hired 2 students this summer and for 8 weeks each. And that funding this year was at 100% wage coverage, except for our employer expenses. We had to continue paying CPP and EI, workplace safety insurance for those employees, but at least their wages were covered through the program, which was at 100% recovery. So that was great. So that's helping us by about $7,800. And since the last report, we did receive word about our CMOG, or our Canadian Museum Operating Grant, and we received our same allocation of $13,445 for 2020. So that was good news. And as of Wednesday last week, when we presented to the Finance Committee, we received word from the Canadian Heritage that we were successful in an emergency grant for COVID from a support fund, and they awarded us $11,899. So again, that number is not included in the projections because that was a good news last minute item after this report was written. So our Cachewackamack Lake Dam, a risk assessment study was completed in April, as the board recalls, and the major repairs of that dam have been now postponed for 5 years. And so next year we will be completing a dam safety review, and that's for next year now. And so that changes our capital program for this year. And as well, the Shabamika Lake Dam, they're monitoring it, doing monthly visual inspections, recording any hazards, and construction is set to begin in 2021. So just the detailed design is happening this year. That again changes our our capital programs this year. So under shared agreement with the City of Ottawa, we are under agreement to complete several floodplain mapping studies. And that's been over a period of 5 years where the city pays us a flat rate of $48,785 per year for the 5 years of the agreement. And the last 2 years, we have not completed as much work as what they've been paying us forward. But this year, 2020, is going to be a heavy year where we will be completing more than the $48,000 worth that we're going to be receiving from the city. And in previous years, when we received extra dollars, the $48,000, and for example, if we spent $17,000 of that, the additional monies that we received just went into the general coffers of the authority and became part of the annual surplus. So this year, when they complete more study work than what was included in our 2020 budget, at a future report, we'll be itemizing those expenses, the extra expenses, more than what we're getting in revenue, will be compensated from the operating reserve, because that's where the surplus that was generated in previous years would come from. So that will come in a future report as well, as we know those expenses come forward. But I just wanted to make the board aware that those will cause us to look like we're in more of a deficit in a future report, but have not been included here because we wanted to give you a snapshot of what COVID has done to us so far. So right now we're projecting, similarly as we did in June, that our year-end deficit is estimated to be around $72,000. At the last report, we were estimating $74,000 worth of a deficit. So we are trudging along and holding the pattern steadily. As the board recalls, that the water baseline monitoring project with the City of Ottawa was reduced for 2020 by about $25,000, but we ended up picking up a reciprocal agreement with RBCA and redeployed those monitoring staff into helping RBCA with the septic reinspection program. And so we're going to generate some revenue to offset that loss from the City of Ottawa. We will then pick up about $22,000 in revenue from RBCA. So one will offset the other. So it's been a good news way to mitigate that risk of loss of revenues. So as previously communicated to you as well, before we had said that we were going to be saving on changes that we had budgeted for 2020 that we've decided to delay because timesheet software for $10,000 and the Latranel conference, we knew that members were not attending this year. So we're going to save $14,000 there. And that all builds into our net financial impact that have been given to you. And so far, now that we've rerun the numbers for COVID, for the additional cleaning products, our personal protection equipment, the additional cost for mileage for staff to travel to and from job sites individually, we were quite concerned about the impacts of the costs of those. But now we're estimating that the 2020 costs for just those extra COVID-related expenses is estimated to be $32,000. In the previous report, we were thinking it could be 40-some thousand. So it is, as our year draws to a close, we're getting a more accurate look at what the true costs have been. So again, when we get to the end of the year, if we have a deficit, which we likely will, it will be logical for, in a future report, for me to ask that we take it from the operating reserve, because that's been the past practice. Anytime we've had a surplus, the monies go to the operating reserve for unfortunate events like this that has happened. Any questions?
I can't see people to take them, so you need to unshare your screen.
Will do, sorry.
I did raise my hand if you are using the hand raising from
Yep, go ahead, Eli.
So the question to our treasurer, if the money was not been, if the work was not been delivered before, why did the money go to the general coffer, did not stay for that specific account? Because this is money that's coming from a specific job, isn't it?
Yes, I agree. It should have actually been allocated to a deferred revenue so that we would pull that revenue in the year that it was happening. So the future years of this agreement, that's how we will handle it for sure.
Okay. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you, Angela.
Any more questions for Angela on her report? Okay, I'm not seeing any more questions. This was for information only, so there is no resolution. So we're moving on to the job evaluation and salary review report by Angela.
All right, so the 2020 operating budget included $10,000 for HR consulting services to assist us with a job evaluation and salary review. We solicited 3 companies with an RFQ requesting those services and decided that the last review was carried out in 2006, and to ensure equitable review, the review was dated or unavailable pieces of it. So the RFQ scope was amended to address those gaps. And the quotes that came in, we received 2 firms responded to our quote. And based on the value for money of the submissions, the preferred firm is Cornerstones Management Solutions, and their quote came in at $24,850 plus HST. And they were the lowest, they were below the other competitor. And so we are coming to the board to ask for additional funds to cover this expense.
All right, any questions or comments? Sally, did you want to make a statement? Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so further to what Ange was saying, the reason for the significant difference between the 10,000 we had budgeted and the additional 15,000 relates back to when we put in for this at the time of budget, so basically a year ago. Ange and I hadn't delved into the project files to see what was currently available. We had understood that this whole process had been carried out. But when we went to the files, thinking we were going to find all this background information that we could build on, a lot of it wasn't there, or a lot of it was very dated, as she said, dating back to 2006. And where the gaps lay, that's the bit that was going to pose problems in terms of ensuring equity, in terms of evaluating the value amongst the various jobs. So that $15,000 represents the additional work that we're having to do to ensure that the jobs are evaluated fairly across the organization. Originally, it had been scoped as more of just a salary review for those positions that we felt were of concern, that they were not in line with market rates, whereas now it's a much more comprehensive kind of study that we found that we had to do. So the RFQ that went out reflected that, and not surprisingly, the budgets that came back were higher than we had initially budgeted for.
Teresa?
Looking at, obviously $15,000 is a lot more than was budgeted. And I know, looking at situations with the town of Carleton Place, when we had put out RFPs or tenders and we got way inflated prices, we just basically didn't go ahead, reevaluated what we were looking for and re-put out. Is that an option here? It just seems like we're looking at a deficit, but that's a lot of money to add at this point. Although I understand why we have to, and that I understand what Sally mentioned in terms of the additional positions that didn't have any information. I'm just concerned that $15,000 when we're facing other financial pressures is a lot of money right now. So I'm just wondering, are there options? We don't have to go ahead with this. We have an opportunity potentially to re-examine and re-put out. I'm just wondering, is that something we can do?
So let's let Sally address it before getting to other questions.
So Cornerstone, which is the company that did the initial work back in 2006, is our preferred consultant. And in our early discussions with them around this, we have been able to identify that they have products that that weren't in our files. And so though when this report was written, we hadn't had those discussions and didn't know the extent of the gap to be filled. Our conversations just in the past week and a half with them have yielded some of the things. So I don't anticipate the actual cost will be $15,000 more. I think it'll be considerably less than that. I'm hoping that the whole project can be done somewhere under 18,000. So, you know, if we wanted to put a limit like that on it, I think that's probably a fair assessment at this point, that the total project value would be no greater than 18. I think that's doable. I think we can make that.
I would be comfortable with that rather than just saying an additional 15,000. Thank you.
All right, Phil?
Do I understand that this study is not just going to take 2 or 3 people in evaluating, but it's going to go across the whole authority staff and see that people from engineers to planners and so on are all fairly compensated? Is that what the purpose of the assessment is?
No, we were focusing in on 8 positions in particular. They happen though to represent almost all of the different levels, pay scales within the organization. So invariably, once we do evaluate those, we're going to have to do an assessment to see if they skew any one of the categories by their reevaluation, and whether or not we need to bump them up a class potentially, or if it throws into question that whole pace band, if I can say that. So invariably, it's going to raise questions across the organization, but the whole driving force behind this was that there are positions within the organization that it was felt do not reflect market rates. And that is either based upon the experience in trying to fill those positions and difficulty in filling those positions, or that it was part of the negotiations with the people who are now in those positions that an evaluation of the pay scales would be carried out.
All right, I see John Carreau.
Sorry, a little slow on muting. I think one of the aspects of any salary review is it's not just what are the market values, but also what is the affordability issue. And certainly in past, we have looked at comparisons with local conservation authorities, City of Ottawa, etc. So I think one of the things that perhaps needs some clarification as to, Sally, is the objective that you feel that we should be striving for market rates, or are we still in the ballpark of being able to say relative to the competition that's out there, including with other conservation authorities?
Right. So depending on the position, the competition may or may not be against other CAs. A lot of the positions are actually comparable to municipalities, so the people on the call here. So we hire from a lot of municipalities, as well as power producers, as well as the market. So at whole. So definitely we wanted it to be on Ottawa, Lanark County based, because that is where most of our employees come from. Though we do get occasionally people applying from afar, more often than not, people are staffed from within the vicinity, a commuting distance of the CA. So as for affordability, you know, if we identify any major gaps that need to be filled, then it's a question of developing a plan on how you remedy that going forward, such that you're being fair to the incumbent and also preparing the organization should that position become vacant down the road. But normally, the greater the gap, the longer period over which you're trying to adjust it so that you're not creating a huge spike in demand on the organization.
John?
Just a quick supplemental. I think there's still value in looking at, particularly because of our working relationship with the City of Ottawa and 3 CAs involved, as to where the market is in that context as well. I think that's just going to be invaluable for us.
And they are definitely scoped in, John.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, are there any other questions or comments before we go to the resolution, which we may need? Oh, I'm sorry, Bill, do you have, I only see your head, so I can't see an arm when you're waving it there. It's only if you, if you wave it in front of your face, I can see. So Bill, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
This is Bill, not Phil.
Okay, I
No,
believe it.
Bill, please, not Phil.
Bill, okay.
Bill King, yes.
Thank you. I'm uncomfortable with this expenditure, particularly at this time. I think things are very unsettled, and I'm not quite sure what the conservation is going to look like in a year or two. And I'd be more comfortable just doing our best efforts in-house right now. And I have to say, echo the comment that was made earlier. I honestly couldn't sell this to my constituents. If this proposal came to our council, there's no way that this would be supported. So in that context, I would oppose this motion. Thank you.
All right, I think Eli is next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I thought if we use the participant raising hand, so we can all go in order, but I guess it's not been used. Anyway, I still think this work should be done, and it's a great idea to do it, because right now all what we're doing, we're just learning about those jobs and evaluating those jobs. There's no decision at this point, about the evaluation of those positions. Am I correct? Isn't the first process is to evaluate, and then it'll be a process put in place how we want to move forward? And I think we're premature to make the call right now or limit the scope, because we need to know what we are dealing with. And I know everyone, we saw the deficit number and we are concerned about it, but it doesn't take our responsibility away from evaluating our staff and have a better understanding what we are dealing with.
Right. So yes, I am trying to run this meeting by looking at hands raised, but some of you, hold on, Phil, but some of you, I only see part of you. And like Bill, I only see your head. I didn't see your hand, so I apologize for that. And you have to put your hand in front of your face if I'm going to recognize you. So I am trying to do this by order of trying to look at a screen to see whose hands are raised. This is not easy. I want you to tell you, this is hard trying to run this. Okay, so next, I think we had Phil Sweetnam.
Yes, you're in the circumstances, Madam Chair, you're doing a fine job, so relax. We'll get the messages across.
It's stressful.
Anyway, look, I think you need to have a broad spectrum of what needs to be done. I've always thought highly of this Stone or whatever their name is. A bit disappointed we don't have the information. Why the heck didn't they have it? They're the ones who did the study. But having said that, I know they've done good work for us in the past. We brought on a number of new people, and we want to keep them, and we want to make sure that they're moderately fairly compensated, and that doesn't mean we'll be able to meet all the requirements if they work for the City of Ottawa or the Rideau, but they should. I wouldn't want people to be leaving just because they can make 25% more for somebody else. We've got good people. I'm impressed with the people that I've seen who have joined us. Let's try and make sure that we're in the range where they might be considered this as happy. Perhaps if we could go along with Teresa's recommendation, maybe reduce it to 22,000 or something like that, just to show them our somewhat disappointment. They don't have the information, but anyway,
Right, so
Thank you.
I'd actually like to see if we could move this along. You suggested a different amount, Sally, for a total of 18. So do you want me to modify the motion to, I guess it would be 8,000 plus HST for the motion that we have here? Like I can do it as amended? Because right now we have 10,000 that's been approved by the board in the past. So if you're saying that 18 is enough, do we want to then say increase the operating budget by 8,000 plus HST? Are you comfortable with that? So you're saying yes. All right. So I'm going to read the motion. And then we'll have any final comments. Okay. So the motion is resolved that the Board of Directors increase the operating budget by $8,000 plus HST and approve use of the operating reserve to address the gap between budgeted and bid prices received for the job evaluation and salary review project. So yes, Phil, any comments?
I was just going to endorse that motion or whatever.
All right, okay, so I have Phil moving the motion. I seconded by Teresa Fritz. All in favor, raise your hands if I can see your hands, please. Thank you. I think the motion is carried. All right. So now we're going to move on to two items. The first one being the 10-year capital needs assessment. This and the next item are really the guts of this meeting, and they're both critical issues. So Sally, please go ahead.
Okay, so this information was presented to Finance Committee last week, and I think we had a really good discussion there. So I'll just start with giving this bit of a background. So as many of you are aware, the CAA developed its first ever 10-year capital plan back in 2018, and at that time it was valued at just over $5 million, and it definitely assumed that we would always get our 50% funding from through the WECI program. And as a result, the board at that time agreed to annualized capital contributions just over $500,000 a year, of which the 277 was dedicated to the mortgage, and the balance was to go into a capital reserve from which we could, withdraw as needed to meet our capital needs over time. Now, as you all know, we didn't get our WECI funding this year. And when we looked into it further, we have concerns about the vulnerability of the organization to getting WECI funding in the quantity and in the year that we need it, because of the dominance of proposals from southwestern Ontario, where there are higher populations, and therefore that on a risk needs basis will likely consistently score higher than us. And so both the funding envelope from WECI and the scoring process, as well as how the program's administered, makes it questionable whether or not we'll consistently get WECI funding when we need it. So that was one big item that we needed to consider. The second one was that the 10-year capital plan developed in 2018 didn't consider all of our assets. It only replaced like for like. It didn't consider whether or not we wanted to, improve the technology or the operating systems on these different assets. It certainly didn't take into consideration the impacts of climate change and whether or not we wanted to make any major changes to the system and how it functions. So, and it also didn't consider our growing IT needs, et cetera. So when we updated the plan, the total plan grew in value from, and I shouldn't call it the plan, the needs assessment. We identified roughly 10 million in capital needs as opposed to the original 5 million. So of that, the water control infrastructure increased in value from 3.5 to 5.4 million. And that was due to the conversations we've already had regarding design operation options regarding the Shabanika and Kashwakandak Lake dams, as well as we identified a need to do work at the Farm Lake Dam. And also, we hadn't included in that initial 2018 version any of the kind of watershed monitoring equipment. These are like the automated gauges and communication systems that we rely on to relay information that's happening on the watershed back to us at the office here so that we know where and how to operate the system. When we looked at the building and conservation areas, the budget increased by roughly $500,000, and this is to undertake work primarily at the Milliken Tail. There's several works that are needed there that hadn't been identified in the original plan. As well on the KMP Trail, while we had identified to the board previously the need to upgrade the handrails at the bridge, we're also thinking that the bridge deck may also need improvement. So though we have identified that, we're looking to discharge that asset, in the meantime, it's, I think, prudent for us to identify the potential capital needs associated with that asset in this needs assessment. And then lastly, we've identified that within the next 10 years, we're going to have to do work on the HVAC system here at the office. On the IT side of things, we've actually identified a cost reduction, and I'll explain this. Currently, we identify $15,000 in hardware and another $8,000 for data acquisition in the annual operating budget. But on that basis, we hadn't actually been doing a lot of asset management planning around our computer hardware and software systems. And so by transferring it over out of operating into capital, we've now developed an annualized plan for what kind of hardware and software replacements and data acquisitions we're going to need over the next 10 years. And when we broke it out in detail, it actually resulted in a potential cost savings. So I think we'll have better understanding and control over our ICT management in the future. In terms of vehicles equipment, it's just under a $200,000 pressure. In part, this is because something moved out of a previous year plan in terms of vehicle replacements to now this next phase. And there are additional equipment needed for the ATV and the riding mower. So at the end of the day, we've identified what we think is a good comprehensive now list of capital needs over the next 10 years. But now we need to, do the hard work of setting priorities and figuring out what sort of trade-offs are needed and what we can afford as an organization, and whether or not we're prepared to capital finance any of these works. So going forward, we're recommending that the board direct staff to start to develop and apply some criteria and come back with some priorities within and amongst the different asset classes, and to recommend an update to the 10-year capital plan. So whereas this is a needs assessment, we're wanting to come back to you with an update to the capital plan, and then to integrate that into the capital, into the 2021-2023 interim financial plan that I'll be talking about next.
All right, so I've been following the chat, and it appears that I need Zoom training. So I understand that there is a little raising the hand thing. So that apparently you can indicate when you want to speak by pressing something that shows up on the screen. I've never used it, so I don't really know what we're talking about.
It's called participant. It's in the bottom of your screen.
Okay.
You can put your course on, and then it'll show you can raise a hand, you can vote, you can say
okay.
no, you can say go slow, go fast, and more option. That's why it's so easy, because everyone can put their name and you can go in order. The first one will appear on the top.
All right. Okay. So are people comfortable using this participant raising your hand in order to speak? Everyone comfortable with that?
Is
Don't
that
raise
the,
your hand.
that the same as thumbs up and thumbs down?
I don't know. All right, well, let's try this method. Thank you, Eli, for the training there. So are there any comments or questions on Sally's presentation? I'm going to be looking over here at the participant screen. Okay, I see Eli El Shantiri. Eli.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you to Sally. Like this report, it is so important to us. I know we talked about it before, Sally, even in the city is almost similar when asset management brought their report in 2012, and I know you were part of that. And really it's so important for the authority to know what our asset is worth and how to maintain that asset. The only risk, and correct me if I'm wrong, once we identified the gap, and then could be easily pointed out, like there's a gap here and we need to address. Same as the city, if they say their infrastructure deteriorated and we don't do anything about it, we could be somewhat, neglect. Have we thought about this? Or you feel comfortable with your reporting mechanism, you're going to be able to move forward with those steps? That's what I need to hear. The little assurance from you, if I may.
Yes. So when it comes to our fiduciary responsibilities, and I'm going to focus on the water control structures at this point, the Canadian Dam Association actually spells out frequency that we need to be considering our assets. So if we fail simply to assess and identify them, then we won't be meeting our fiduciary responsibilities. Then it's up to us, once we've identified those needs, to prioritize them. And we'll be prioritizing them in the context of this criteria that I think, staff need to go away and come back to you with. And not just for our water control structures, but for all of them. And I think, and I was talking to Mississippi Mills about this last night, as municipal asset owners and, or administrators, that we might identify something as staff as being required in 2021, but there are affordability limits and constraints, and therefore, maybe we have to put it to 2022 or 2023. At a certain point, however, when we do our risk analysis, maybe something's going to move from a medium to a high, and then we got to do it. So I think it's through regular updating of the risk and evaluation of priority setting that we will help to manage both the affordability and our fiduciary responsibilities.
So will it be fair to say this is going to be in steps? So the first step to identify, and the next step to prioritize, and the third step is to achieve. And for our job to be able to measure your success in addressing those concerns. Did I get that right?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Sally.
All right, so I see another blue hand for John Carreau.
Thank you, Chair. Sally, in terms of criteria, does climate change adaptation fit into that equation?
So bit of a giveaway. Jeff and I are having a call later today about the Policy and Priorities Committee meeting. And this is where I'm proposing that we bring forward to that committee draft criteria. And so climate change could feature into that. At first blush, some of the ones, Eli mentioned, I was previously involved with City of Ottawa priority setting around asset management. And key things that we were considering there were, at that time is it a regulatory requirement? Did it pose a financial or other type of risk to the organization, et cetera? However, I think everybody knows that the City of Ottawa has now declared a climate emergency, and it is now a variable that the City of Ottawa is taking into consideration and moving forward with its programs. So definitely it's something that we can also include in our evaluation.
Thank you.
All right. I'd like to make just a comment too, because we did have this discussion at the Finance Committee. A large number of the costs, or a large amount of the costs that we will face are related to the water control structures. So I think the board needs to be presented not only with priorities, but also with options for some of the larger expenditures. And we did have something brought to us, it might have been in June, where we were looking at a manual control structures versus automated versus semi-automated, and there were different costs associated with them. We didn't really have life cycle costs. We just had pretty rough order magnitude costs. So I do think, given that we have financial challenges, that we can't just be presented with priorities and this is your only option for a particular priority. I think that where there are options for how you carry something out, that those would need to be assessed as well. Because we may have to make some really hard decisions in that we have a mandate to fulfill and insufficient funds to do it. So I really want to make sure that the board is presented with decisions on where it has to spend the money and what options to take. Okay, Sally?
I think that's absolutely possible in the 1 to 3 year range, where we've identified that something is a priority, and then it's a question about to what degree are we going to fund that, whatever it might be. I think the thing to recognize is that as we get out into the further distant time periods, there are already Class B estimates, which have a much larger range for that very reason. And I'd have to talk to Euro, and Euro, you're on the line. So if you want to add something to this, just raise your hand or the like. But Class C estimates may already allow, depending on the type of project we're talking about, that kind of variability, because the Class C, it's both a plus and minus X percentage on the estimate side of things. So it may already be embedded, that kind of variation on the budget.
All right. So John, you still have a blue hand. Do you still want to speak, or do you need to remove your blue hand? Sorry, John, you're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
So I found out how to put my hand up, but I didn't find out how to put my hand down. So I need some help.
Press the same button. Press it again, raise it again, and it'll take it off.
So
Raise it
press,
again, raise again your hand, and it'll take it off.
Thank you. Okay. I've gone to the washroom and I'm back.
All right. We need to move on to, oh, I see a raised hand from Yura.
Yeah, so I just, can you hear me okay?
Barely.
Oh, okay. Hopefully it's gonna be better now. I just wanted to add that basically just what Sally said, that really, you know, like in this long-term planning process, you know, we will be considering all the options, you know, including decommissioning of some of the structures, right? So we are really be looking at the whole scale of potential solutions, right, for each structure. And as Sally said, you know, this is a long-term planning process and will require a sequence of studies. You know, at this point, we can only be providing very rough ballpark costs and really need to proceed with some initial inspection studies to really confirm, you know, the deficiencies and the existing status of these structures. And once that's done, we can be able to define more accurately, you know, like the costs and solutions to these studies. So it's really a process that will require some sequencing of studies, right? Starting with, you know, like the dam safety reviews, dam inspections, and so forth and so forth. Just wanted to add that.
Okay, that's fine. So please remove your blue hand. So I'd like to read the resolution on this. All right, so resolve that the Board of Directors direct staff to apply criteria to support priority setting within and amongst the asset categories to recommend updates to the 10-year capital plan for tabling with the 2021 budget, and to integrate capital plan recommendations into the draft 2021 to 2023 interim financial plan. So I need someone to move.
I'd like to move this, Madam Chair.
Okay, so we're going to use visual hands here to move. All right, I see a visual hand. Eli moves, second. I see Bev Holmes, seconds. All in favor, just physical raising of hands. Yeah, I see Bill. Yeah, thank you. And I think the motion is carried. All right. So the next topic is the interim financial plan. So Sally, this is you as well. And you're muted.
I had to get out of my PowerPoint to unmute, so I have to get back into that. My apologies.
I hate Zoom. Hate.
Okay, so people can see my my PowerPoint now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. So the goal of the interim financial plan is ultimately to be able to continue on our, to deliver our mandate and priorities within a sustainable financial framework. And so specifically, you know, we're looking to document where the pressures are and areas of risk, and to begin to discuss our priorities, both on the operating and the capital side, and to develop not just the 2021 budget, but looking at the next 3 years, where we're going, and to have these discussions as well to help us form the corporate strategic plan, which we're looking to commence later this year, and the transition plan that we know that we're going to be asked to prepare per Bill 108 that was approved by the province last year. So I think that, you know, doing this work now will help us tremendously going forward. So when we're looking across the programs and services, I know that in Lanark County in particular, there's been some criticism of the organization over the years that we're performing work that's outside of our mandate and that we're strained from our core. And so the next couple of slides address this directly. Because I don't think that that's an accurate reflection of the work that we do. So for starters, under the Conservation Authorities Act, we're mandated explicitly to deliver programs and services designed to further the conservation, restoration, development, and management of natural resources. And then the Act goes on to give very detailed examples of exactly the kind of work that we're allowed to do. And I can tell you with certainty that that is the scope of work that we perform here at the authority. The next thing is that we're obligated by a memorandum of understanding that was executed between the province and Conservation Ontario, and by extension to us, that we have to review municipal planning documents and development applications to ensure that the areas that the MVC has an interest per the Conservation Authorities Act have been adequately addressed, and to comment specifically on areas of provincial interest as spelled out in the provincial policy statement in section 3.1 having to do with natural hazards. So the province has delegated to us that responsibility. So when people are saying we're overstepping our responsibilities as it relates to municipal planning reviews, we are not. We are fulfilling our obligations per that memorandum of understanding between ourselves and the province. We're also required to comment on planning applications as it relates to our own regulation, which is 15306, which relates to permits having to do with the alteration to wetlands, shorelines, and waterways. So almost everything we do having to do with municipal planning processes, we do through this memorandum of understanding with the province. We're also mandated per the Clean Water Act to act as a source protection authority. And then we also have a memorandum of understanding both with the City of Ottawa and another one with the County of Lanark to provide advisory services where municipalities ask for it, where we are a subject matter expert. And so I think where some of the confusion lies in terms of the work that we perform related to municipal planning applications is where our commenting responsibilities and our advisory services begin. And that, just so you know, is an area that we are actively working on to make sure that it's clear between ourselves and our municipalities and for the various applicants who are, going through those various processes. But at the end of the day, we are performing work where a memorandum of understanding exists. So then lastly, we do deliver a variety of things that are funded through various fees or other transfers where we have agreements, bilateral agreements. So we have bilateral agreements with OPG and with MNRF related to their water control structures. We have bilateral agreement with the City of Ottawa to do various stewardship and floodplain mapping type of things. And the list goes on, and you can review that at your leisure. The bottom line is that everything else that we do in some shape or form relates to a bilateral agreement of some sort, or which are delivered on a fee-for-service basis. And that would relate to the last few, our education program, the museum program, and all our facility rentals and the like. So what Bill 108 has done in terms of, okay, so where are we going forward? And again, this is on a financial basis. So Bill 108 says that we now have to deliver the full scope of natural hazard services through our permits. And this includes unstable soils. And so what we're going to need to do going forward is identify specific areas of risk within the watersheds and develop a risk mitigation regime and permitting approach. Because currently, this has not been a focus of our efforts. We've done it on a site-specific basis, but we haven't gone out and actively identified where these hazards exist and proactively manage them through our permitting program. So this is a budgetary pressure that we're going to need to consider going forward. The bill also represents areas of uncertainty because the language used in the Act is very broad. So not all of what are classified as mandatory is readily apparent and clear. And so until we get the regulations, which we've been told will come out this fall, but as you may recall, we were told they'd come out last fall as well. But those regulations will hopefully spell out for us and clarify what are the mandatory programs and de facto what may continue to be funded through the municipal levy. Of course, the future of the Milliken Tail is also in question. And because of COVID, that uncertainty remains because the good work that was being done with the community to try to find an alternative service delivery model has sort of stalled due to the crisis that we are all dealing with right now. The bill also spells out a more complex budgetary process. So this is another reason why it's very important for us to have a good handle on what our operating budget and pressures are, so that as we move through with implementation both of the transition plan and future budget exercises, that we're all of a common understanding. So that's a huge driver for me in preparing this report for you. So some of the specific programs and services that are in question because they're not explicitly clear in the Act are these ones that you see here, whether or not they will fall under mandatory or whether we will require memorandum of understanding between the authority and individual municipalities to deliver this. And as you can see, combined, they constitute almost 30% or just over $1 million of our budget. So it is not an insignificant percentage of our budget that is sort of hanging in the balance right now while we wait for these regulations to come out. So as you also know, last year, mid-year, we got a cut in our budget that we received under Section 38 for the O&M of our flood system and flood forecasting and control system. And I went back and looked at previous annual reports, and I found it very interesting when I went to the 1979 one, because it very clearly spelled out in that annual report that in 79 we received $148,200 from the province for that purpose. And you do the math, and it's a real dollar decrease over the past 40 years that that we've received from the province. And the message here is that that decrease means that the municipalities around the table have had to fill in that void. So so not only have you been filling the void on the WECI side, you've also been fulfilling a huge percentage on the annual operations and maintenance of our systems. So, in conclusion on there, we receive less than 4% of our operating revenues now from the province. And so it's interesting that so much of Bill 108 focuses on this when they have so little control over our actual budgets. These are municipal decisions, your decisions as board members, as the major contributors to our budget. We actually are required to get our $128,500 per year. We complete really fairly comprehensive reports back to the province, where we have to demonstrate what our eligible costs are. And so over the past 10 years, consistently, they've covered less than 8%. And so the 2019 budget, our actual costs that we reported to them and that were eligible costs was $1.6 million. We got $128,500. Okay, so now I'm going to get into pressures related to our operations here. So as many of you will know, particularly in the lower watershed and in the Carp watershed, we have seen a fantastic growth in development and permit applications associated with the growth occurring in the community. And that places pressure on our engineering staff here, because it's the same engineers who are doing the technical reviews on those development and permit applications who are also delivering on the capital program, carrying out the dam safety inspections and trying to do the overall comprehensive analysis of the watershed to determine how we need to adjust both our infrastructure and our operations of that infrastructure to face the impacts of climate change. So those are not insignificant pressures. And then in terms of, some of the structural kind of information or infrastructure we need to address, this list here speaks to the kind of information that we have access to and the methods that we access them and how we're managing them compared to where we need to be as a conservation authority operating in the 21st century. So what this list illustrates is a lot of our systems for collecting, managing, analyzing, modeling, and then operating our systems and our decision making need a tremendous amount of updating if we're to achieve the kind of important objectives we have to really manage the impacts of climate change on the watershed. When I was speaking to the growth and planning and permits, this illustrates, how we've seen in some respects almost a near doubling of our CA permits and our planning applications that we're having to review. and reflecting of the growth that many of you have seen in your municipalities. And of course, adding to this is the pressures associated with the floods of 2017 and 19. And what I find interesting is, and we were talking to planners at the City of Ottawa recently, is that this boom is expected to continue, at least from their perspective, that the tremendous construction rate and planning applications is expected to continue well into next year. So with respect to these various planning and permit applications, there's sort of this then trend that's happening in the background, which is that they're becoming increasingly complex. And one of the reasons is because many of the areas developed within the lower Mississippi and in the Carp River watersheds, when they started to be developed, literally over 100 years ago, there were no stormwater management facilities or systems in place. And so you have this long-standing areas that have limited to no stormwater control, either in terms of quantity or quality of water. And so those are systems that need to be accommodated as the communities grow around them. And then where the communities have been growing, historically, not surprisingly, developers were seeking the best land to develop. But increasingly, due to the pressures of growing population and housing demand, it's now proposals are regularly coming in that are within the flood fringe or in wetlands. And so these type of applications require much more complex analysis and modeling to ensure that there is a capacity within the receiving system to accommodate them and safely. And they're often also subject to more complex negotiations because they involve a lot more cut and fill and maybe multi-landowner agreements and timing negotiations, what gets constructed when, what gets assumed, in terms of when things will be built. And all this is occurring within Planning Act timelines. So there's a huge overlay of time sensitivity and managing client expectations around this. So it's not like that we have the luxury of just getting to it when we are able. We have timelines that we must meet. And when people are dealing with their application, they are passionate about it. So, so let's just say that, there's a lot of pressure that staff are under to deliver on these more complex plan and permit reviews and the like in a timely manner. So additionally, when we look at our conservation areas, this whole COVID event has really identified a tremendous demand for natural spaces. And I think we can all agree we'll be interested to see how long this is sustained. But in the meantime, it's identified at RCAs and others the real demand for adequate washroom facilities and operations and maintenance, for increased parking, and for improved pathways to allow for both more people and for accessible access for those who are, confined to wheelchairs or who use walkers and the like. So for example, our Purdon facility, those who have visited there will know that the pathways, the raised walkways, are actually quite narrow. And so it became an issue that people were feeling uncomfortable passing each other, if they were going in different directions. Now, we of course have put up arrows for some areas where that's possible, but in some areas it just simply wasn't possible to put up arrows. We also have several smaller properties, largely, for which we have unknown risk. And so I've listed them here. So one of them is a roadside pit that actually forms part of the property associated with our Palmerston Conato facility. And this is an area where members of the public, without permission, are going into the roadside pit and using it for dirt biking and the like. So there's risk associated with the general public going into this site where without agreement and with no supervision and signage that has been posted there in the past has come down. So we need to think about what we want to do with that site. Similarly, there's about a 3-kilometer stretch of the riverbed of the Carp River that we own, including a detention pond that was built, I want to say in either late 70s or early 80s, that we don't have any sort of really firm agreement with the city about. And it's just not normal, quite frankly, for a CA to own a detention pond. That's usually a municipal asset that's turned over by developers. So, we have to figure out, what is the risk associated with continuing to own that asset and how do we want to manage it forward. McLaren's Landing is an area on the Ottawa River where the CA was asked to come in and address an erosion road stability issue in the past. So we went in, and so the berm in theory is an asset that needs to be maintained and ultimately replaced over time. But there's no agreement that we could find between ourselves and the former township of West Carleton. And the berm is built on private land. So we have an asset that we constructed on private property with unclear responsibilities and liabilities going forward.
Ellie, sorry, I just wanted to do a time check. I mean, you're going into a lot of detail on some of these.
Okay, sorry.
Really, this report is really important, but some of this detail probably doesn't need to be what you need to go into in your approval presentation. Just wanted to kind of get it to the main issues rather than the details like about each of these properties.
Okay, so I'll continue forward then. So in short then, amongst our CAs, and these other properties, we need to figure out what we want to do with them. And amongst all our, long list of the capital programs, we need to figure out if there are opportunities under the expected stimulus program to move forward with addressing some of these gaps and pressures. And that raises the question of how are we going to fulfill our funding element if it's a 30-30 or 33 percent split between ourselves, the province, and the feds. So on the staffing side, some of the key points I want to raise is that we do have highly technical, cross-trained, multi-focused task staff. We are needing to pay them in accordance with what we can get or what the marketplace is commanding if we were to get the quality of staff we need. And, historically we have a practice of using contract employees a lot, but obviously there are limitations to where and how you can use contract employees, and that they tend to leave over a period of time because we're not offering them full-time work, and that places additional pressures on management, both in terms of the whole trying to hire people back in and then training process. So there are some specific staffing needs that are arising from some of the things I've spoken to you about. So on the engineering side, to deliver on our capital program and while maintaining our response times on the planning and permitting side of things, I think we need potentially additional resources there. Our GIS person, this is core to our work, and yet it's not fully funded by the authority. It is dependent upon, at this time, partially funded by a grant from the City of Ottawa associated with the floodplain mapping work. So at some point, the full cost of that position is going to come back to the authority. The Whiskey program, which we use to support much of our operations now, just as some of your municipalities may have full-time IT people, this Whiskey person that we've had on contract, we feel needs to be a member of our full-time team to make sure that we have ongoing support for that work. And to date, we have been able to offset costs of that person through partnerships with other CAs, and our goal would be to continue that. And then on the planning side, again, support to deal with the volume of and complexity of applications. And then lastly, the foundation, the work of the foundation simply is not being adequately supported right now, and there is not the capacity within current staff to really support active fundraising from the organization. some of the information and communication technology pressures you would also be seeing at your municipalities. So I've identified them there. The ones I'll highlight are the geospatial data and the orthology or orthophotography and LiDAR and climate information that we need. And that it takes up a fantastic amount of storage space. Not unlike, a lot of your infrastructure programs would require that. We need to be moving increasingly to real-time system integration, and there is a goal to do this across Eastern Ontario. And in fact, I'm in conversations with both South Nation and Rideau Valley about a potential project to the province and feds on that. And of course, our ongoing challenges regarding video and teleconferencing, as I think many of us have experienced during COVID. So lastly then, in terms of insurance and legal costs, these are consistently growing over time, particularly on the insurance side. And we discussed this last budget, that it's constantly higher than the cost of living and getting into double-digit increases. And on the legal side, all these land ownership issues that we're having to resolve in advance of forwarding our capital program take a tremendous amount of legal support. So when I look at the revenue side of things, right now, the vast majority of our revenues come from yourselves via the municipal levy. We do get a fair amount of user fees and revenues through these various bilateral agreements. And so, we are concerned, obviously, going forward about the pressures and how they would impact the general levy. So to that end, we've constantly made use of grants and have applied to various granting organizations, and they're listed in the report there in detail. But to date, they've been of limited value and duration, and overall, they've constituted less than 1% of our budgeted revenues. As Ange identified earlier, because of the special grants coming out as a result of COVID, we were able to up that this year, but that can't be counted on going forward. Going forward, as I mentioned earlier, we need to start to prioritize what we want to address if we're going to apply for stimulus funding, and how we're going to contribute to those, the funding of those projects. So when it comes to fees for services and partnerships, I say few are full cost recovery, in that most of them are aimed towards full cost of recovery. But as the complexity of our planning applications have increased, for example, that our funding, when we look across the actual time invested to conduct some of these reviews versus historically, there has been an increase in time. So there's an opportunity there. The one thing I would caution is that amongst ourselves, RBCA and South Nation, we have had a policy of trying to look at having consistent fees, planning and permit fees across the city of Ottawa, and then extending beyond that. So, if we wanted to take a hard look at our actual costs for some of these fee for services, we would need to do so at minimum in consultation with our other CA partners. Looking at my notes here because I'm cognizant of the time. So there may be opportunities to expand, the scope of what we charge fees for. So for instance, there's some basics, like we don't charge, generally speaking, for, the odd bit of photocopying that people ask from us. But that said, you're really working around the edges at that point. That's not going to make a huge difference to our overall budget revenues. So right now, 7.3% of our annual self-generated revenues go towards debt repayment. And as you may know from on the municipal side, the Municipal Act allows municipalities to debt finance up to 25% of their self-generated revenue. So we're a long ways away from that. If we were to, go into debt up to 25%, it would be equivalent to, $952,000 per year. So we're nowhere near that right now. The two capital projects that we have, within the identified, the major ones within the 10-year needs assessment, if we received WECI funding to the tune of 50% and we chose to debt finance those over 25 years, the combined amount would be $72,200. So again, well within the amount that we have in terms of borrowing capacity. And even if we didn't get the WECI funding, and if for fiduciary reasons, risk management, the board decided to proceed with those projects in the absence of WECI funding, we could debt finance those two projects over 25 years to the tune of $144,400 per year. So all this slide is highlighting is that if we want to debt finance those two major long life assets, we have the capacity to. The one thing you need to consider is that CAs are not able to directly go into debt. They need to do it through one of the member municipalities who have sponsored that debt on our behalf. So at the end of the day, we need to work with you to prioritize these various pressures and to develop a revenue and financing approach to address those priority needs, and then to integrate them into a 21-23 interim financial plan. So that's the recommendation.
All right. Any questions or comments, please use the blue hand. Any questions or comments?
I can't find the blue hand, and I've tried the thumbs up. It doesn't seem to work. Anyway. You put
All
me on
right.
the-
My understanding, just so that what you need to do is you need to press the participants button on the bottom of your screen, and then you'll get a pop-up menu on the side.
Got it. Thank you.
All right, so right now, John Carreau, you have a blue hand.
Not going to the washroom this time. Sally, that was an excellent overview. Sally's actually done something very similar with the Public Advisory Committee. And in essence, they too are challenged with realizing that you can't have the ideal service model. You can't have everything you might want or need. So it is a priority setting exercise. And it will take some time, and it'll probably take some time because it's more likely, because of budget pressures and politics, more of an incremental investment over time, rather than we're going to fix everything in 2021, or that we're going to end up with all the clarity we need from the province in 2021. So I'm very supportive of this exercise, and I support the recommendation, and kudos to you, Sally.
Yes, Phil Sweetnam.
Yes, I'm in agreement with setting out the priorities. I think it's important that everybody pays their fair share, especially you're mentioning the high cost of trying to deliver assessments, the responsibility of the Conservation Authority on time. If that's costing more, we should be working strongly with our fellow conservation authorities to be sure we've got enough in the fees to cover that. It shouldn't be something that comes out of the taxpayers of the watershed. And I think that goes equally for the province. They seem to be quite aggressive about asking us for additional responsibilities, like the source water protection and unstable lands and stuff like that. Yet they certainly haven't done much in the way of supporting our operating grant. So I think we should go, we should push fairly strongly for that WACI funding. I'm hoping that Euro can make some good photos that show, or a good report that shows how badly off the Shadow-Mika Dam is, because it hasn't, that information wasn't available when we submitted it last time. And we weren't that far from the cutoff line. I'd like to think that we will get more money from the province, but even within the current financing, if they keep going, I think we might make it. But I think a good report there will really help us. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, thank you, Phil. Faye Campbell.
I have a question about the borrowing of money. Should you already have money borrowed from one municipality? I think it's for the building. So if we had to borrow from this money again for another dam, do we have to stay with the same municipality, or like could Beckwith be your host to borrow the money?
I don't think we're under any constraint, but I'm going to ask Ange if she could chime in here.
Absolutely. There's no restriction as to keeping with the same municipality, or we can reach out to another. It depends on the host municipality and what their debt borrowing capacity is left. So.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
All right, so the people, Phil, could you remove your blue hand, please? You simply press the blue hand again down below. Thank you. All right, are there any more questions and comments? Because I'm going to read the resolution, see if we can do that. Resolved that the Board of Directors directs staff to prioritize and quantify 2021 to 2023 operating and capital pressures, identify a revenue and financing approach to address priority needs, and draft an interim financial plan 2021 to 2023 that sets out the above for consideration by the board. So I need someone to move. I see John Carreau moves. Faye Campbell seconds. Any more questions or comments before the vote? Okay, all in favor, visually raise hands. Anyone opposed? I see, thank you, Bill. Anyone opposed? Kirby, are you opposed, or no, you're not opposed? All right, so I think.
I had my hand up.
All right, there you go. The motion is carried. All right, so we have about half an hour left, unless we can go over. The next one is an important one. So Sally, it's Sally and Ross Ferguson on the Palmerston Beach land transfer.
Can people see my screen okay?
Yes.
Okay. I've lost my cursor. Where's my cursor? Don't you love it?
I cannot see your screen.
No?
No, I don't think you're sharing.
Oh, neither can I.
Okay, I'm having technical difficulties. Can you hear me at least?
Oh, yeah.
Could you tell us what page you're referring to? And I have it on a separate screen.
Yes, I'm okay. I think maybe, have I got my cursor back? No. Okay, so page 2. I'm just gonna, so if you can look at the map on page 2 of the PowerPoint that we distributed.
Okay.
So the area that is the deep red is an area of overlap between what we thought we owned and what the neighbor thought they owned. So that's where the initial problem lay when back in 2018, North Frontenac approached the Conservation Authority and said, hey, we've been leasing this from you guys for some time. Why don't you sell it to us? But very quickly it was identified that there was this land ownership issue. Then as time progressed, it was determined that it's even a bit more complicated than that because the areas that you see identified as parts 21, 22, and 23, it appeared under, property identification numbers that that adjacent owner had rights to those parcels as well. And then lastly, there's a question of that neighbor having right of access over parts 17 and 19. And so the past 2 years have been spent sorting this out and trying to come to an agreement with that adjacent landowner. And we're now finally at a stage where we're able to sign on the dotted line, whereby we basically say, you know what, you can have that dark red bit. It's contiguous with your property and it's not doesn't form part of the beach property, and we haven't been actively using it. So we'll give you that dark red bit, and you basically release any sort of title or right of access, etc., on parts 21, 22, and 23. And so that's been agreed to verbally. And then lastly is the question of easements across parts 17 and 19. And we're waiting for that in writing from them, whether or not they formally want both or just one. We have the paperwork to give them one or other or both. And so if these transactions transpire, then we'll be in a position to sell for a nominal price to the Township of North Frontenac, the area that's outlined by the dark black dash. So that's where we find ourselves today. The next steps to being able to execute this is that the township would need to, after myself and the chair execute any of these transfer documents, the township would need to complete a property survey, and the board will need to adopt a formal resolution declaring the property surplus, and we'd need to provide both of those to the minister. Now, there is a requirement in our the rules governing CAs that we need to provide public notification that we intend to sell the property, and that needs to be part of our application to the minister. So what I'm proposing is that on that last slide there where it says draft resolution, this is basically your, a statement of your intent to sell, and this is what we would be providing notice to the public on, basically saying that, whereas the township has, leased this site since 2002, and that it's, the township has many properties that it manages for recreational purposes, and that we don't have any long-term plans or interests in managing the beach itself, and that there's nothing of provincial significance related to conservation lands or managed forests. And those are words right out of the rules governing the disposition of property, that therefore the board would be resolving to sell it, declare it surplus and sell it to the North Frontenac in accordance with those rules. So if the board approves this motion, then Janet and I would assign the legal documents that would allow this to proceed, and we would ask the township to take the next step to surveying and the property. And we at MBCA would publish a notice to the public stating our intent to declare it surplus.
Right, and so just to make clear, the resolution that's on slide 3 is not the resolution we're looking at today. Today is simply to move forward with getting to the point where we have the surplus declaration.
That's correct.
Right? Okay, so I have a question or a hand up. Nope. Okay, I have a question from Kirby Thompson.
Yeah, could this property be put on the open market?
If you wanted it to be.
Would you make more money?
Probably. Yes, I think we would.
Okay.
All right. Sorry, any more? Sorry. All right. I've got blue hands coming and going here. I don't see any more blue hands. Are there any more questions or comments? Okay, Phil Sweetnam.
Yes. while we might make a bit more money, I think we've had a long-standing relationship, and Frontenac has taken a load off our hands in terms of managing this over time. I don't think it would be worth the loss in a good relationship to try and make another couple of $1,000s. Are they? Do I understand that Frontenac is covering the cost of the surveys? Thank you.
Yes, they're covering the cost of surveying and registering it on land titles.
Well, we're not making that decision today anyway. The only decision that we're making today is related to go forward to allow the execution of the documents necessary to clear up all the conflicting ownership of the land. That's all we're approving today. In the future, we will make a decision on how we wish to dispose, or if we wish to dispose of the property. Okay? Yes, Sally.
If that's the case, Janet, you will need to amend the motion. If you want to defer.
It says about the property and transfer the property to North Frontenac, right? So we would eliminate that, I think was what we're hearing. I think all right, so let me make sure I understand what I'm hearing. Would people prefer to leave it open at this point in time as to what we will do with the property once we've cleared up all the title? And then I can eliminate on the motion, which says let me read the motion so you understand. Resolved that the board direct the chair and general manager to apply to the province and execute the documents necessary to resolve land title issues at Palmerston Beach. So we could just end it there. But it currently says, and transfer the property to North Frontenac Township. So what I would like to determine is whether we would like to remove that final phrase about transferring and leave that open until we've actually gone through the process or not. So I see John Carreau, you have a blue hand.
Thank you, Chair. I would agree with the assessment that Phil has made. If we were starting this process all over again, then I would agree that, we could look at just selling it in terms of real estate and going for the highest bid. But there is history and a good working relationship that I think is extremely important in this case. And my encouragement is that we resolve it now, go forward with the transfer.
All right, thank you. All right. Phil, do you have a blue hand up? Because your hand keeps coming and going, so I'm not sure what's going on there. Okay, Phil, you're muted now.
It was changing my mind when John Carew sort of echoed what I feel, and I would support going forward with the transfer to Frontenac as the final motion.
All right, Kirby?
Yeah, okay, so I agree with that, but is in the transfer to North Frontenac, is there any financial gain for Mississippi?
No, we executed after they came to us in 2018. We exercised, we signed an agreement that they'd have basic first right of refusal on the property, and it speaks to, I think $1.
Okay, so my point is, we've been just talking about budgets and shortfalls, and I think it was said that for a couple $1,000s difference in this case in that property, I would say it would be more like probably $500,000 difference. If you were to sell it as real estate. Like, we're not talking a couple $1,000s here. It's prime real estate. So that's just my point. Like, I mean, if that's not the road we don't want to go down, well, that's fine.
Yes, Sally?
Yeah.
So the one comment I would make is that several of our water control structures are in the township of North Frontenac. And on 2 or 3 of them, we are currently in discussions with North Frontenac about easements for the purpose of reconstruction of Kashwakamak and Shabamika, and safety measures at Mazenov. I think I would just caution you how you proceed, and I'll just leave it at that.
All right, so I'm going to read the resolution then as it is written. I'm going to ask for movers and seconders, and then I'm going to ask for any final comments before we vote. All right. So resolve that the board direct the chair and general manager to apply to the province and execute the documents necessary to resolve land title issues at Palmerston Beach and transfer the property to North Frontenac Township. So I would need someone to move. I see Phil moves. I need someone to second. I see Teresa Fritsch seconds. Are there any more questions and comments before we vote? All right. Oh, I see Bill King. Sorry. Yes, Bill.
Sorry, just trying to unmute here. I guess I agree with some of the comments made earlier, but I have some concern about transferring it without sort of doing any analysis at all. Like, if we don't even know what it's worth, like, surely we should get an appraisal before we start talking about giving away assets. And I would like to know how much it's worth before we make that decision. Thank you.
All right. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a vote on it as it is written, and I will look for members for and members opposed. All right. So all those in favor of the motion as written, which says it will have the transfer to the property to North Frontenac. Can I see a show of hands for those in favor? So I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 hands in favor. All those opposed. So I see 1, 2, 3, 4 opposed. So I'd have to go and look at our bylaws. I think we have, how many people are here in the quorum?
I didn't see where Eli voted.
Give the land.
Sorry, yes. Eli, did you vote for or against? Eli may not be there. Let me just check. So how many, I don't have a roll call because that didn't get sent to me. So I don't know how many we have. And
we have 12 that were present, but I think we've lost Eli, and I'm just going down my list.
well, I saw there's 6 in favor. I haven't voted. There's 6 in favor and 4 opposed. And so we have,
It's only 10.
right.
I'm missing somebody. So I have that in favor was Phil, Krista, Teresa, Glenn, and John Currow. Did I miss anybody on who voted in favor? Jeff. Okay, that was the missing person. Okay, so against was Kirby, Bev, Faye, and Bill. And then we don't have Eli on the line right now.
Right, and I haven't voted.
As it is, the motion is carried, 6-4.
All right. So the motion is carried. Thank you. All right, so let's move on then to the Carp River Conservation Area License of Occupancy. Yes, sorry.
Can I ask, was there a direction to staff to solicit an appraisal? Am I taking that as a direction?
That was what was suggested by Bill, but we have not included that in the resolution. Okay. Would anyone like to request that there, like, I'm not even sure, do we need another resolution to address that?
Well, it doesn't override the one that you just adopted. And that's,
but by understanding how much it's worth, we've already agreed to transfer it. So we're going to transfer it knowing that we haven't realized a potential gain of hundreds of thousands of dollars. I'm kind of looking at what
it's redundant, because if we've already agreed to give it away, then there's no sense getting an appraisal.
okay, I was just looking for confirmation, that's all.
I will give you like another part, which is that if you're going to use it to negotiate with North Frontenac, perhaps an appraisal is worth getting, because then you can point out to them the value of what they are getting and what you may be looking for in return.
Yeah.
Right? So I am wondering whether it would be worth doing one, because they cost $2,000 or $3,000 or $4,000 depending on the property. Because then you can indicate, look, North Frontenac, this is the value, and we need these sort of, we're looking for some quid pro quo. So I don't know, given that comment, would the board be comfortable with directing staff to do that? I don't know, are you raising hands to approve? I got so many blue hands up here, I can't. All right, so, and I have hands that don't disappear, they're just there, okay? All right, Bill King, I see your hand.
Yes, well, of course, it would help our negotiating position if there was a mutual understanding of the value of the asset. And secondly, we are a public institution. I think taxpayers and ratepayers have a right to know how much we're giving away.
Okay. John Carreau, do you have a blue hand?
I do have a blue hand. I think the recommendation to look at the property value in a quid pro quo way of negotiation is valuable. And I think one of the differences that maybe we haven't touched on yet is this has been a public space. If you're looking at real estate value, you're not necessarily talking about a public space or amenity any longer. And certainly if we're wanting to negotiate with North Frontenac, and I'm keeping money in mind as well, knowing what its commercial value is a smart way to be able to say what's good for the goose is good for the gander. Thank you.
All right. So I think we're saying, Sally, and I don't think we need a resolution, is that staff, staff is directed to get an appraisal as part of the process.
Great.
Thank you for asking that.
Thank you very much.
All right. So let me just get rid of something here. All right, so let's move on quickly then to the next item on the agenda, which is the Carp River Conservation Area. If we can get through that quickly.
Okay, I'm going to see if my cursor and everything are working now.
Sally, can we just do a verbal? We're at 2:53 p.m. I'm wondering if it's possible to.
Okay, sure. Yes. Okay, so we have got to the final stages of our negotiations with the City of Ottawa regarding us being able to refer to the Carp River Restoration Project as a conservation area. We have settled upon, that we will be allowed to put in signs and lookout, one or more, as long as we get approval from the city in advance of the location. That we will be responsible for the installation and repair of those structures, but that day in, day out operations and maintenance of that site will reside with the city, and that we will provide adequate insurance coverage. So I'm very pleased with where the contract has landed and hoping to execute this week. Janet, I should just let you know, I got an email in from the city this morning saying they may have a few more tweaks. So we're not quite past the finish line yet. I know. We thought we had it. And then this email just came in this morning. So we're so close, everyone. We're so close. So what we're looking, I'm just not even asking for a resolution here. I just wanted to make you aware because the board had previously directed staff to enter an agreement, and we're ready to go forward with that.
Right, and just 2 points is that none of this is being paid for out of any levies. It's all being paid for by donations. And I just wanted to make a correction. Our fundraising effort is being led by the Force of Nature, Marianne Wilkinson.
Oh.
And so she is although I'm kind of shepherding the whole project, Marianne and Mike Cleland of Cleveland Jardine Engineering are the 2 leads for the fundraising. So, so anyway, that's just a quick update on that. All right, so again, moving along, the electronic meetings topic.
So I have an update on this. So the key issue is that the way our amendments were worded and that CA's amended the wording in their bylaws across the province allows us to meet electronically like this during a declared emergency. Now, as I think almost everybody's aware, the province moved out of a declared emergency at the end of July. Some of your municipalities are still in a declared state of emergency. And so under the legislation, we're still allowed to meet like this. However, there were CAs in the province who didn't have any municipalities that were still in a state of emergency. And so they lost the ability to meet remotely. And so I just got in today a directive from Minister Urick allowing us to continue to meet electronically, regardless of whether we are or not in a state of emergency. That said, what I'm stating in this report here, and this is also something I wanted to have a discussion at the Policy and Priorities Committee, is do we want to allow electronic meetings to continue in future, or participation electronically? And if so, under what circumstances and how? So Janet has a very firm opinion on this. But this is something that I think we need to collectively discuss and for you to make a decision regarding. So it is also to be on the agenda for that next PNP meeting.
All right, thank you. Hold on here. Great. All right. So move on to the strategic planning. Oh no, I need a resolution, don't I? Do we still need the resolution, Sally? Or are we no longer required to use this resolution?
Yeah, we don't need to.
Okay.
It's redundant.
Get rid of that one. All right. So now let's move on to the strategic plan report. And after you talk about it, I have something that I want to add. Okay.
Right. So as people may recall, this was originally supposed to be done last year, but because of all that happened last year, starting with the flood and moving on to all the other changes that happened legislatively and the like, we deferred it to this year. And then it was supposed to start earlier this year, but then COVID happened. And so finally this fall, we're looking to try to get it underway. Janet and I have been in discussions over the summer months trying to produce some background documents to start to have a conversation with one or more consultants who we might bring on board, and also to engage staff in this about what are some of the issues and themes that they would like to see addressed in the strategic plan. And so this is a very simple outline in this report about the key steps that we're looking and timing to be followed. And so at this point, I actually will turn it over to Janet because she is going to be the board champion for this initiative and work with us on it.
Right. So a lot of you may not know my background, but I was an engineer and a senior executive in the defense industry. At one point, I ran a $300 million business unit, but I was lucky enough to be chosen by the company, the U.S. corporate headquarters, to undergo a lot of strategic planning, not only training, but be involved in it throughout my career. And then when I did consulting, I specialized in strategic planning. So I have a fairly good understanding of what is involved. Why we need to do this, and as Sally indicated, the sort of last update or the last strategic priorities or set of actions was done for 2015 to 2018. And my view is that the MVCA that operated in that time frame is not the MVCA that is needed in the 2020s and beyond. The organization is facing profound transformation in response to external issues and internal challenges. And it's that time when a strategic plan is vitally important to an organization. So I think we've heard a number of those issues today. Many of them are documented in the financial plan background report. I'll summarize what I see as the 4 key things that are driving this need. So we have these changes in the regulatory framework under which MVCA will operate. And this affects the scope of operations and how we fund our activities. So that's pretty fundamental. So we also have the financial pressures due to aging infrastructure that we are mandated to maintain and manage. And there are issues about how we will be able to afford to do that. We will have an integrated watershed management plan for the Mississippi River, which is really our raison d'etre, our reason to be why we were created was to address the watershed of the Mississippi River. And this watershed plan will be informed by physical and empirical data and by the input of stakeholders on the Public Advisory Committee, who represent a cross-section of residents, businesses, and institutions. And number 4, we have challenges from climate change, which are the extreme events, droughts and floods. And we have population growth, which we heard about today, and we have increasing demand on limited and unpredictable watershed resources. So that the two of them combine exacerbate each other. So a good strategic plan consists of 3 main elements, and it consists of a diagnosis. Out of a sea of complexity, it identifies critical issues that the organization is facing and must address. And I would say that we have a lot of that now. That diagnosis in the backgrounders from the Integrated Watershed Management Planning, from this interim financial report that you received. We will have the Bill 108, hopefully the regulations coming out. So we have a pretty good diagnosis, and it's out of that sea of complexity is picking what are the main things that we must address. Second issue that you have to have in the plan then is a guiding policy. And this is your overall approach to how the organization will address the challenges. And these must be coherent. That is, they all have to fit together. There's goals, which are your higher level things, higher level aspirations, and they are supported by measurable, actionable objectives. All right, and then the third item is the action plan, and that's the details of how you're going to carry out the guiding policy of these goals and objectives. So a strategic plan is not a long list of things to do, because we could all make about 2 or 3 pages worth. And my view is that we absolutely need to do this. The situation facing the Conservation Authority is complex. Not everything is a priority, we've heard that. And the planning will address that. So that's where we're coming from. And I think that the 15,000 that we're asking for to have somebody who can facilitate the process allows an external person who is not affected by biases or by preconceived notions or by any kind of a preconceived notion, I guess, of what the objectives might be, that they can hear all the voices from board members, from general managers, from the general manager, from the staff, and take those and help facilitate the creation of the guiding policies in the action plan. So that's what we see unfolding, starting, I guess, sort of this year, but mostly unfolding in 2021. Right, so I just wanted to give you guys that background. All right, so are there any questions or comments? I see a blue hand from Phil.
I guess that must be something that I was going to respond positively to what John was said, but since you offered me the opportunity, I can't understand why you'd want to do a plan like that when most people like myself have so few preconceived opinions. Anyway, thank you. I think it's something worthwhile going ahead on.
All right, thank you. Risa Fritz.
Just again, kind of looping back to what we discussed earlier, I think definitely value. I think strategic plans are roadmaps, and you can't move forward if you don't know where you're going. So I think the exercise itself, but I would just caution, based on numbers we saw earlier, we need to keep a control on the cost. It's not something we want to see spiral out of control. And considering the time we're in and work involved, I would hate to see another request come back to us looking for another $10,000 to complete a strategic plan. Thank you.
Fair enough. All right. Any other questions or comments? All right, so we do have a resolution. Resolved that the board approve allocation of up to 15,000 plus HST from the operating reserves for consulting services to lead MVCA through a strategic planning process. So I need someone to move. I see Kirby moving. I see Bev Holmes second. All in favor? Hands waving. All right, thumbs up. Okay, the motion is carried. Yes, Sally?
I just wanted to make everybody aware, I'm going to be sending out an email to everybody. I know that some of your municipalities have had strategic planning consultants do work for you. And so if you want to respond in confidence to me, you know, were you happy with that person? Would you recommend them to me? That would be very helpful.
Great. Thank you. So now we have a quick verbal update from Sally on council fall presentations.
Right. So I've now attended 2 council meetings. I was remotely tapped into Carleton Place last week, and last night I was at Mississippi Mills. So over the next 6 to 8 weeks, I'll be visiting all of your councils, and I will send you one-on-one emails notifying you when I'll be attending your councils. I'm pretty sure next Tuesday I'm at Lanark Highlands. So yes, Bill, it's next week. There you have it.
Excellent. All right. So is there any other business before we adjourn the meeting? Anyone have anything else to say? Put up a blue hand. All right, no blue hands. So I have resolved that the Board of Directors meeting be adjourned. I need someone to move. I see Jeff Atkinson moves. I see Krista Lowry second. All in favor? I see hands and thumbs ups. So the motion is carried. Thank you. I know Eli may not be online, but thank you to Eli for my quick Zoom training. I learned all about blue hands. All right. Thank you, everybody.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.